About controversies and controversial things. Live streaming to be a bit clunky and awkward, to say the controversies. This is the Sunday update stream because I am indeed working today doing updates. I'm a network administrator. In case you were ever wondering, it's also my chance to update any of my subscribers who may decide to tune in and watch this as to what's going on with me and stuff I care about and talk about. I'm a little scruffy today. You see, I have not shaved in a couple of days, either there or there. I typically do that twice a week because I don't know, I'm just old, or I don't care, or I don't feel the need to put on such professional airs anymore. I don't mind being a little scruffy for work, so I get kind of lazy and kind of do this all together. Running late on Friday, which is one of my days, and I normally do it, and I just trimmed instead of shaved, and so now I'm looking scruffy. You can barely tell in this. Let's see today, but the hoodie is kind of my thing for videos, so I'm stuck with it. I'm gonna have to sweat a little bit, but anyway, am I a real YouTuber now that I was late for my own live stream, even though I said sometime between 3 and 4? I then committed to 3:20 and didn't get down here till almost 3:40. Some basic that's just me. It typically is just me. I have a thing on here, viewership. This is kind of just me putting out there my take and opinions on certain things that have been going on recently. The NIFB and the Pumpkin Posse. Steve McRae and the Non Sequitur Show debacle. And that is two things I want to talk about. Steve, those topics that has irritated me, my opinions on it. I have positions. They are flexible and malleable, but I'll tell you where I stand on them at the current point in time. I was trying to think of somewhere I could throw the word temporal. It's the new, I don't remember what the NFA stands for. It is the food bank, just so we're clear. Nor is it the Voice of Small Business Association based out of Washington, D.C. They are the this is a New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church. My first consideration here is let's make sure we talk about the correct NIFB. Understand that they are not the only group using that acronym. So please understand that they are basically, so there is the fundamentalist pieces put members of that community to death. It is an abomination before God, and the government should do something about it, preferably killing them. That's awful. That's terrible. That's wrong. I totally and completely disagree with that position and believe that position is wrong and detrimental not only to the LGBTQIA plus community, which I may say LGBTQ. No, what's that other acronym? GSRM. Lesbians or bisexual women should be put to death along with gay men and trans people. From their biblical, and I don't know, and the point is that's irrelevant to, broadly speaking, their very terrible views on GSRM people. back in the day, a month ago, referring to him as Mr. Pumpkin or something like that, because pumpkins are the largest fruit, which is, give or take, more or less possibly true. He and his friends and his community latched onto that and formed what is basically referred to as the... some very famous people like Shannon Q and Godless Engineer and Casey and people, which is kind of where I have a problem. There are two issues that I have with this movement in general. I'll say that for the big people that I expect to see in this thing, I don't see a lot of it. I don't see a lot of people who are saying that there is a lot of these are bad people kind of things instead of these are bad ideas. And good people can have bad ideas and bad people can have bad ideas. The thing that makes them different necessarily is things that are not those ideas. I think this is complicated because I didn't want to talk about this. This is like, to me, this is the more controversial of the subjects because I didn't want to talk about this because I agree with the goals of the Pumpkin Posse and the things that they want to do. I have a significant problem with two aspects of their campaign, which is what I want to talk. Getting the idea out there that these are bad ideas. We need to speak out against these bad ideas, and we need to convince people that indeed these are not good things to do. But it shouldn't be relevant to making the argument against their positions. It's terrible to want to kill people for what, using that as a criteria for what, or that certain people show patterns of this behavior. But I think that attacking the people for who they are, who have this, you're not that person, they feel safe. And that's why we need to challenge the ideas and not the people. Because if I sit here and say that, like, you know, let's pick William Lane Craig is a dishonest charlatan and he retires, that doesn't make his ideas any better. Arguing against William Lane Craig as a person himself, this is kind of a halfback kind of position here, doesn't make his ideas better. When he goes away, his ideas don't go away. But if we argue against his ideas, then that's what we have constructive dialogue. Because if somebody likes him, and we say, this guy's awful, they shut down. They'll support their tribal member over hearing you out and hearing about the idea that needs challenging. How many people will that alienate? I don't know. If it's more than one, if it's even one, isn't that worth the gay people instead of on the fact that Pastor Anderson says that it's okay to kill gay people? God wants you to kill gay people. Tangent to that, I don't think that arguing that the state should kill gay people is violence or call to violence. Sorry, Shannon Q. We're going to differ here. A call to violence is, you should do this. That has to be taken in by somebody else, and through their personal experiences of what they think is a slippery slope. I don't think it's a slippery slope. It is a short walk from espousing an idea to, because Charles Manson went to jail, and not why he didn't, because he didn't just say, if he had just said, well, you know, maybe somebody should go kill these people. It was his actual direct incitement of this. Please come back and make more YouTube videos. You're awesome. Your points are very well articulated. You're very clear. clear and concise, and you have a strong grasp of choices. We decide how we are going to react to things and how we are going to feel about things. Feelings, and it is not easy because there's lots of things that come together to create the cascade of brain chemicals that we associate with feelings, but they've all come from, been enhanced by, or are in some way derivative of some type of choice. Most of the time. And I'll throw a caveat in there because the way that people have experienced cognition typically is we and this is an analogy I've gone over in my head several times. Help that along by what things will fit in the basket, or how they'll fit, or what will fall through the bottom, by that type of container, if you will. But we can choose to modify how we do things so that we can get different things from different ideas, and people can learn to be more healthy and active, and people can learn math when they think they're bad at math. They can choose to engage in certain behaviors through trial and error to learning how to do things differently. If we didn't do that, it would be pointless to teach anybody anything. It would have all... There are several theists out there who will say that they used to be atheists and now they're not. Most of their stories involve kind of a, I don't know if there's a God, and oh wait, maybe there is. But there are cases where that's not the case. There are people who've changed positions, but that is necessarily making a choice based on certain criteria. If they value, the mystical experience they had that changed their position, okay, great. Does that mean that it's any more or less true? Probably not. But it is not late in the day for coffee. Good thing that's the end of the pod. So, all right. The other part of the problem I have with the Pumpkin Posse is one of the tactics that they've been using, and so one of the things that they've been most proud of, to some extent, is, and PayPal is the one in particular that I know about, and basically getting them kicked off of PayPal. This to me seems like a terrible, I think is a bad tactic. I thought it was a bad tactic when churches would argue that gay rights groups shouldn't have bank accounts at certain banks in certain areas back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Because it wasn't accepted, they were considered immoral, and they had those avenues of funding shut down. Wasn't good for them. I don't see how it would be a good tactic to be applied to what I would consider my group. I'm not gay, I'm not LGBTQIA+, or any of those acronyms. I am not probably GSRM in any stretch of the imagination, but I consider them part of my group. And I think that tactically that's a bad idea. It's a bad tactic to go after people's financing and funding. There are limited exceptions to that. I think that individual groups going after individual groups through corporate sponsors, know that you're gay, or calling your employer and letting them know something about you that they may not like, but may not be meant. And don't get me wrong, I support the movement. I support most of the things that are going on with this and how they're handling it, and I'm all for marginalizing their positions even further. Bad tactic. And I think that it needs to, everybody that's engaged in it, because they feel righteous, they feel like this is what we need to do for you to make your point. Paraphrasing there, because the idea is that your feelings are not sufficient reason for doing or believing things. Or a trans group to somebody and have them and their positions removed, which was happening probably up until 2007, 2010, 2011-ish, maybe as late as 2013, 2014, depending on where you lived. There are places probably in 2019 in individuals' positions. Don't try to circumvent the system and cut their legs off. Because all you do is you make them look like the victims now. This group of angry atheists is now attacking them, and it just proves that God is righteous and Satan terrible and bad. And show them their positions. PayPal, sure, as a private entity, may have some kind of thing. I don't know if Chase feels that way. I don't know if, Bank of America, I don't know if any of these other places have policies like that. And you could just, by trying to shut them down. Let them have their say. Just make your voice something like that. I mean, have better ideas, better points. That's about all I got to say on that one. That's pretty good. Half hour on that particular topic. I'll try to skim through the next two faster if I can. I don't want this to go more than an hour unless I have to. I hopefully don't have to, but I do have some things I still need to do today. Speaking of which, while I'm sitting here, drinking coffee and talking, checking a couple of my servers. I'm down towards like the end of my installs here. This one I can log off of. Currently keyframes are not being sent often enough. I chose the default settings here. Why is my more info is not giving me more info? Anyway, hopefully this recording will not be awful. If it is, I then may end up having to do this offline and then fixing it later, which is kind of crazy. I have a 100 megabit service. I'm only sending data at 1080p, 30 FPS in 4:3 format. I'm not even sending it in it's not even 1080p, but anyway, back to Steve McRae, the Non Sequitur Show. And I'm going to call this a debacle because, and I want to get this out of here. And top of my head, those people that come to mind immediately are both part of the Pumpkin Posse and supporting Kyle from the Non Sequitur Show. Kyle found himself in a position where he felt he was doing most of the work on it, and Steve wasn't. And basically Kyle said, all right, Steve, well, you're not being very helpful, so I'm just going to do it all now. See you later. This became his agnosticism as far as his argumentation goes, and he wrote about this. Of the two people involved here, I don't know that I interact far more with Steve McRae than I do with Kyle, and I'll give Steve credit for distance ad nauseum as it is. There are two conditions to becoming a theist. One, you must be able to hold a belief, and two, you must believe in at least one God. Okay? If you don't meet those two criteria, you are not a theist. You are a non-theist. An atheist. Steve! And Steve, I have to say, a lot of your epistemological problems you have with that term and that usage come from the fact that you are trying to export a usage of the word from one epistemology into another without looking at it in the context of where it comes from. You're looking at it in terms of how would this make sense in philosophy, and you throw in a bunch of nots. And guess what, Steve? Nots are not the same thing as propositions. To say that you don't believe that there is no God is not the same thing as saying that you believe there is a God. Disbelief is not a positive position. Disbelief is not the disbelief. It's like subjective. Microphone that I hit, my coffee cup, my microphone, rocks, babies are all objectively atheist because they cannot hold theistic positions. They cannot hold beliefs. So they cannot meet one of the two criteria needed to become a theist. Then there is subjective atheists that can hold beliefs, but do not hold the belief that there is a God. Not that they disbelieve positions. They're not exact antitheses of them. A not is not the same as a is. Semantically, they may be. Mathematically, they may come out that way. But in the actual epistemic positions, they're not the same. But because you are trying to take that position from one epistemology and apply it to yours, you don't understand that. Atheist is non-theist, it's the same thing. You want to talk about the negative position of... No. You want to take the positive position of affirming a negative and say that the way that people use the word is somehow relative to how your philosophical math works out. And it just doesn't work that way. You and Graham Oppie are both wrong. Although I will say that from watching some things about Graham, his position is a bit more nuanced than yours is. You seem to be in this mindset of brute forcing it to work. And maybe I just haven't watched enough Oppie, or he's just better presenting his arguments. I think you're both, generally speaking, looking at the other atheist positions, incorrect in your conclusions. But that's not what I want to talk about. I spent way too long talking about that already. I felt like I had to get it out there, though. I was going to see if you watch this. I'm going to do a video taking your blog post. No, it wasn't a Facebook post. Was it a blog post? Talking about the actual positions of Steve McRae, and I'm going to go through and talk about that. That may be my next... Back to the Non Sequitur Show. I think that Steve is probably right. Kyle shouldn't have the ability to just come in and swoop in and take over the show. I understand Kyle's position. I understand from listening to Kyle explain his position why he feels that way and why he felt that was what he had to do or what was appropriate or necessary. I also feel like that's probably why relatively speaking, I don't think this is going to necessarily change anything. No legal proceedings that are going to come out of this are going to necessarily get Steve McRae back into the show or get him any more money than NSS kind of thing. The I's weren't crossed, the T's weren't crossed. Any even half-assed lawyer is going to have an easy time keeping Kyle from losing a whole lot of anything else. I don't think that what Kyle did was right. I think that Kyle should have taken his talents to South Beach as opposed to taking over the channel. He could have and should have, perhaps, made it clear to Steve that he was going to leave, and then left. And taken all of the stuff that he made for the show with him. Been like, thanks for playing. And gone off and started his own channel with his own ideas, doing his own thing. I get it that the non sequitur was, Kyle could have grown the channel quickly, especially with people like Atlas Engineer and Shannon Q and the other people that support him coming along and supporting his channel. They don't get along with Steve as it is. I can understand people not getting along with Steve. I want to like Steve McRae. He makes it hard. And I don't know why I want to like... You know what? I want to like Steve McRae just like I want to like Adam Friended. I think they both have the same kind of problem. Adam in particular. That's why Adam runs into a problem with me mostly. Is that he keeps coming back to the same arguments, saying the same things over. Justify his position more and more instead of, like, he's got himself in this little box, I guess, where he's... I don't want to call it an echo chamber. It's not an echo chamber, but it is certainly a place where it's engaging honestly in conversations. And I want him to keep thinking that, but I want him to do a little more of it. Adam's another guy that I like. I actually like Adam in spite of the fact that we disagree on certain things. And Adam has a problem with straw men, both in making straw man arguments and not recognizing straw man arguments. He also, for some reason, doesn't engage with me on Twitter anymore. I don't think I'm muted or blocked from him. But I also make honest criticisms that don't ever seem to get through to him. I have had conversations with people on Twitter that he has been responding to, that when I jump into it, suddenly Adam stops responding to the thread. I don't know. I don't think Adam's afraid of me. I think that Adam just doesn't want to talk about that. And this is off the topic, but this is how they're related. And Adam, if you watch this, which I don't think you will, but if you do, or if you know Adam, maybe have him talk to his mods a little bit. I jumped onto his live stream the other day on Think Club. His video with, I can't remember the guy's name. His picture is going to be on here. Here, let's flip over here. Boop, 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 boop. This guy. I followed him on Twitter after this. This guy's a good radio voice. If you listen to him, which is this one over here. And I listened to the I came in late to the stream. I listened to it for about 20 again. And what I meant by that, of course, was that the same things that Adam was talking about that he's saying is that we don't need religion. We look at the Nordic countries who have less religion and they're doing well. And that one doesn't follow the other. We still need religion in poor places. And this guy pointed out, are these poor places like the Middle East that have more religion, are they any better? I mean, they don't seem to have, like, their complaints about their epistemic security. No, it's not epistemic. Is it epistemic? Is that the word I'm looking for here? Their security is not, they don't feel safer having religion than they do in places that have less religion. Places that have less religion, they feel safer. But if the idea of religion made them feel safer in places that were poor, they would feel safer in places that were poor, but they don't. They feel less secure. Which is way up here. I had my comment right here and right here, and it actually was not over here. This Ordinary Devon's comment and then Blake Foster's comment, and mine was missing. No, it wasn't a productive comment. Yes, I thought it was a good point to point out that it wasn't something that, like, this isn't a new argument. This isn't the same kind of thing that gets talked, like why you think things are a certain way. it's like there's the cognitive dissonance between what you're expecting and what you're getting is not helping you at all. Again, I don't want that to be. Steve McRae kind of has the same kind of problem. Although Steve seems to adopt some of those changes, I pointed to argue with him. So I know Steve likes to fight. I know Steve likes to have the verbal sparring, and that's fine. I don't begrudge him on it. I'm just not going to engage him. But Steve seems to post a lot, especially on Facebook. Steve posts a lot of stuff on Facebook that's designed, I want to say, to start conversations, but it's really about starting arguments. And that's what he wants to do. That's fine. I don't engage unless I think it's something I haven't argued before, or I think that he's really just looking for a fight, and then I'll point out that he's looking for a fight. Handle things differently, and I think that, but I also think that I think Steve is just screwed. Without agreements, and with Kyle having all the keys to the kingdom, that whole possession is 9/10 of the law thing really applies here, because there's not a lot that he can fall back on. And I think that they're going to end up going to court on this. Everybody's going to lose. Nobody's going to be happy. And I think that it would have been better if Kyle had just his same friends to help build up his channel, and it probably would have done very well. But now he's got this whole... I don't even want to see this when it's done, I think. Stupid autofocus. It's the first time I noticed it, but I'm sure it's been going on as I've leaned back at the whole thing over again. Let's see if I can change this now with OBS open. The last time I did this, I ended up screwing this stuff. Changing it to widescreen doesn't help. Auto white balance, autofocus. I try to turn off. Yeah, so I think that Steve was screwed. And Kyle, I think at this point I wouldn't do business with Kyle. I mean, I would go on his show, I would be friendly. I don't know, this is kind of a little too shady for me. So, but I'm not his dad. I don't get to tell him what to do. Last but not least, now that we're just over an hour, trans-athletes fairness competition. I'm going to throw this in here almost as an afterthought, because it comes up and I keep seeing it on Twitter, especially from Christiosity. And again, at least she's willing to engage, unlike Christy Winters, which is fine. You know, she's allowed to have her opinion. She's allowed to be as radical as she wants to be. I'm not going to tell her that she can't be that way. I will disagree with her and have my own discussions, which I just don't engage with her, because even in areas where I think I've tried to engage just to bring some nuance to a position, I don't think she's engaged honestly. She's been kind of angry and stuff, and whatever. It's just not worth my time. I keep her on Twitter so I can kind of get this super lefty perspective. But I feel it's futile to discuss topics where we would disagree. The idea of trans athletes in particularly women's sports. I don't think that Rationality Rules' latest video was that bad. I think he made an honest review of his positions, far less rhetorical citations away from it. I've stopped caring about his position. I subscribed to him at one point on YouTube. He made some decent videos. He made some good points about religion. But when it came to anything relating to LGBTQ, GSRM, trans people, whatever, there was always this I would consider an extreme position where, and I don't want to say that what he thinks is that trans people, for example, should be exalted in some way. But it does kind of come across as he doesn't want everybody and everything has advantages and disadvantages. The concept of privilege, broadly speaking, in most cases, evens itself out. There are people who will exceed the norm. Segregate based on sex, not on gender. I'm going to diverge for a moment to explain what the fuck is wrong with the sex and gender thing. And I haven't managed to swear this entire thing, but this pisses me off because nobody seems to understand this. I'm trying to think of how deep of a rant I want to go on this because I have whole positions on this. Gender is not assigned at birth. Gender is a role that we express based on a broad set of characteristics. Two sexes. Two comedic sexes, which in context is the sexes that we care about. There are people who are intersex who don't necessarily fall into either category. They are the rare exception. Gender, broadly speaking, is a set of characteristics assigned to the characteristics of male or female sexes. Gender roles are how those set of characteristics are applied socially. There are two sexes, and therefore, because gender is based on sex, there are two genders. There are an infinite number of expressions of those particular roles and characteristics. None of them have to be set in stone. I don't think you can necessarily be non-binary, but you can be bisex. Females on one side, women or men on the other side. Women is the term that is often associated with female. Non-Catholics have had and still do have a problem with things related to sex. And so saying that somebody's sex was female made people uncomfortable. So instead of talking about the sex, the thing that they cared about, they began to use slippery language like woman to describe the group. Woman has a close correlation with the sexual group. It's what they want to measure. People don't care. Like, there's no state interest in knowing how someone identifies. I think having the word gender on a license, driver's license or something like that, is wrong. Nobody should be able to change because gender shouldn't be on there. Two comedic groups. That's useful information for like Caster Semenya, who has female sports. She's not even trans. She's just intersex. By that same condition, I would say that people who have transitioned genders should not be competing in classes that are not their sex. We separate female competitors. Sports are, like, top-level sports are in the margin. Top-level competitors are freaks of nature. They are the extremes in all cases. Get a group of, let's pick a sport like soccer. You would not necessarily get a group of women's, like a women's soccer team, to go and play in a men's league, because even in the middle tiers there, you'd probably end up with the women's team not doing as well because the men would tend to be taller, they'd have longer legs, they'd have more muscle, greater heart, greater hemoglobin capacity, a larger heart volume, all those kind of things that would make them separate from the females, the males in that league, where they have men and women on the same team. I kind of like Noel Plum's idea of female and then open leagues. The open leagues would be kind of like they are now, almost exclusively men. We're talking about the professional level. But in the lower levels, they could very well be mixed and have some very good, female participants in those leagues. A female power lifter lifting as much as a male power lifter in the same weight class. But you'd have far more female power. You probably would not have a lot of 120 kilo plus women competing in the upper echelons of it, but you'd probably have nearly as many, 67 kilogram women competing as 67 kilogram. Well, you'd probably have a lot more 67 kilogram women competing than 67 kilogram men. Because men, generally speaking, are larger and heavier and things like that. So we could segregate based entirely on weight or height or something like that. Fairness-wise. In order to classify people together, we need to find a way to kind of, broadly speaking, into one group or another. We can do that based on weight. We can do that based on height. We can do that based on sex. The conflation of sex and gender is what's causing this problem nowadays. It is fair to have women of the same... It is fair to have competitors of the same sex compete together because overall that's a division of groups where one group is more like the other than they are the other group. Just like when we segregate by age in powerlifting, I'm with the strings and going all over. No, I don't need one of those. It's not that complicated. We are going to exclude people for different. Nobody is going to argue that somebody in a wheelchair shouldn't compete in a 4x100 relay. They would merely take the fast to the extent that there are potential advantages, not necessary advantages, but potential advantages. Just like there are potential advantages for somebody who does steroids for many, many years and then against other males. And it's really man to woman and not male to female, because the sex terms in particular get confusing here because they're so entangled with the gender terms. I'm a fat guy. I'm not competitive in marathons. I don't know that my frame, my body physiology is best suited for deadlifting. I don't have to lift the bar very far off the ground. If I do sumo deadlift, I'm only moving the bar about movements I'm well suited for. I'm not well suited for gymnastics, although I am rather coordinated. I can do a cartwheel and things like that, even at nearly 300 pounds. Actually, I could do it even when I was over 300 pounds. But my necessarily make them unqualified for other events. I don't see how people can make this argument that, and the whole, athletics is not fair anyway argument. Okay, so it's not fair. So what's your argument then? Trans people should just suck it up and deal with it. And if it's about not being fair, I don't know how many times I'm going to quote finger like this today, huh? Jesus. If it's not fair, then it's not fair. Then your argument has no point, and then they shouldn't compete anyway. Because saying it's not fair doesn't help anything. If the argument is that you want some kind of fairness, and you want to include trans people, that's fine. but they should be included in their sex grouping, not in their gender grouping. Because then you do get into this whole, well, I can just say that I'm a woman and compete in the women's group. Especially if there's no criteria for how that should happen. Such as testosterone levels being under 10 parts per million or whatever it is. Not above 5, I think is what it is. Millimoles per whatever. I don't remember what the measurement is. I know it's 10 now for the... I watched his videos. I've read some of the stuff that he's quoted, that he cited. Same with the stuff from Rationality Rules. I've looked at some of the stuff that... studies that they quote. That, and anyway. I'm gonna broadly speaking say that I think I agree with Noel Plum's positions on this. And about because of religion. Yes, that's my anti-theism there coming out again. But honestly, Protestants are gender language to not say the word sex. Conflating the two things quite frequently in their argumentation. I've done it as a slip of the tongue. I know the differences, and I think that we need to focus on the sex differences and not the gender differences. We should include everybody in all the things that we do, but we should make our positions clear in places like athletics where we segregate your speech. We should strive to do that more so than he does, more so than he achieves, and I think he tries to be too nuanced at times. Although people take him out of context too. I disagree with almost all his positions on the Bible. I have warnings out the wazoo here. I don't know why. And hello, as always. Let this hang for a little bit because I know that if I cut it now and YouTube hasn't caught up yet, it's going to just